So I probably dragged the process out a little more than I should have, and it's scary because your whole identity is tied up in that entity that you created, and people know you as that person who owns that business and runs that business, and then one day that's not who you are anymore, and it's like, well, then who am I? And it's when you don't know the answer to that, it's really tough.
All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin End.
And I'm Shane.
And today we're here with my man, Dan. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Great to be here.
All right, excited to have you here. A little context for you listeners. We met at a really interesting event. Dan is actually a part of EO, and for those of you that do not know what that is Entrepreneur Organization. It is a vetted community of entrepreneurs. That's not what he does. I just felt like that was a really cool touch point to talk about. But aside from that, Dan, please tell our audience who you are, what you're up to, and what you're building.
I'm Daniel Heck. I'm kind of roaming the earth. I was just telling Shane about this. I sold my company a couple of years ago, and it took me a little time to find my next purpose, and I'm slowly figuring that out. So I'm feeling like I'm on the right track now.
I'm really curious because we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners all the time about the growing pains and the mental focus of becoming an entrepreneur and then a successful entrepreneur, and then bottlenecks and bottle caps. You reached a point of exit. I don't feel like we talk about this enough. Let's start with there. What did it take for you to mentally say, now is the time to sell?
Eventually you just know it's time. And I'm also a believer that the second you think in your mind, I need to get out of the business, it's already almost too late. Like, you need to always be kind of prepared to exit at any moment. Someone much wiser than me talks about how everyone eventually exits their business. It's either voluntary or involuntary. So you're always going to have an exit. That's just the reality. It's about how you plan for that. I just reached a point where I couldn't do that business anymore. I was just very burned out. Thankfully, the exit process was not too painful for me. I basically had my partner buy me out. So it was a relatively, I use the word term relatively, pretty loosely, painless process. So the business is still out there. It's still going strong, which I'm thankful for. I don't want to see them succeed without me. But it's a weird place to be, from waking up every day and knowing what you're going to do that day to having nothing, and it's very open ended, and it's a little bit it can feel a little bit like free falling, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, unicorns after you sell. Everybody thinks that even no matter how much you exit for, it's not this. It feels good for a day, maybe, and everyone's obsessed about it, and they keep talking about it. They're so excited, and in reality, it doesn't really feel good in a lot of ways. So a lot of people want that, they have that dream of exiting, and they don't realize the other side isn't. They think that there's a lot of jokes about that you can use all that money to wipe away your tears, but in reality, it's money doesn't make a difference on the happiness. That's everyone says it, and it's hard to understand, especially from the other side. When I was coming up. I didn't come from a very privileged background, so I struggled through my college years. I was having some real tough times with financial side. So I always thought money would solve all my problems, and it didn't. It's unfortunate. I wish it did.
I think that's the big thing to actually, sorry, Ruben. I think that's the big thing to point out though, is once you actually become financially stable, not meaning that you're not living paycheck to paycheck anymore. Your bills are paid, you have an investment portfolio, you have a nest egg, a savings fund set up where you're taken care of. You're not worried about things. Once you get to that point, it's now shifting over to your mindset is now success driven and what's my purpose. And when you get to that point where it's an exit and you're like, okay, I've spent my days doing X, Y, and Z, and now I'm no longer doing X, Y, and Z. What do I do now? What's my why? What's my purpose? And I feel that I currently struggle with that too on the day-to-day, where it's okay, if everything is taken care of, you've built a well-oiled machine, you're contemplating on exiting or selling, or do I double down and reinvest into the company and see if we can make it bigger or better? That's a very big emotional, mental pain point to get over. It's huge. It's very tough, because that's what I'm saying. I'm currently battling with this like bottleneck situation for the past like year or so. So I think it's I want to dive in real quick, and I'm sure Vin wants to talk previously about what you said. I'm sorry, Vin. I'm just so curious about this actual topic. Did you take a hiatus? Did you go travel? Did you mentally, what was the next steps, and like what are you focusing on now, and what's been that timeline?
So I actually went to a darker place. I did not go to I did not get to travel and do all that fun stuff. I had a little bit of existential crisis actually when I after I sold. Actually, it was during the sale. And it was even tougher because I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I felt very like alone. I ended up checking myself into a hospital for a short time. I mean, it was bad. I did not know who I was and what I was going to do with myself. So it wasn't. I didn't get to vacation in the south of France. It was a very humbling experience to go through that. So it's yeah, and it was also tough because I was actually at the end of my deal with my partner. So like he still to this day, I don't think ever knows that way I went through. So we were good friends. It was tough because even though we had a painless exit, I couldn't like lean on that friendship in that situation. So it's a tough thing to go through. You feel very alone when you own a business. That's why when I even mentioned the EO, I joined that years ago. It was huge to have a network of people who were in the same boat as me, and they experience a lot of the same frustrations. It didn't matter the size. I mean, I've sat in a room with guys who have $1 million business, $100 million business. The issues that they're facing are all the same. It all kind of boils down. We're all human beings, and we all face the same problems.
Yeah, that's why I have a job. So
I agree.
The interesting thing to me is you kind of experienced what I try to warn people about, because so many people spend all of their time and put all of their value into their businesses. And don't get me wrong, right? When the business is doing good, they're on top of the world. When the business is doing bad, they're crappy and they're going through it. But they also don't consider like what happens when this thing that you've given how many years, how many hours to is no longer there because you're selling it or whatever the case may be. And I always implore people, I'm like, please, you have to detach from putting all of the value of your life into your business, because if you don't, I'll see you once you sell the business too, as opposed to right now. And so I'm just curious for you, right? Like through going through that dark place, through going through that moment of like, I sold the business, I spiraled, I had nothing to do, I existential crisis. Did you get the introspective space within you? Have you gotten to that part of like, oh, if I had done X differently, maybe I could have avoided stepping into this? Or is that something you're still trying to figure out?
So I usually don't think about life in those terms of like, if I could do things differently. I'm a big believer in like, I'm here because of my experiences that I went through. And so I never really think about trying to change my past and think about doing things differently myself. I would caution other people maybe doing it differently themselves. And I would, hopefully they can learn from my maybe mistakes. But I try not to dwell too much on if I made the right decision or didn't make the right decision, because the decision was made either way, and it's you can't change that. So I mean, there probably are things that could have made things easier for me over the years. I honestly probably should have exited sooner if that was anything. I mean, I probably dragged that out too long. Like I mentioned earlier, as soon as I thought it, I should have just done it, and I probably thought it 2 or 3 years before I did it. So I probably dragged the process out a little more than I should have, and it's scary because your whole identity is tied up in that entity that you created, and people know you as that person who owns that business and runs that business, and then one day that's not who you are anymore, and it's like, well, then who am I? And it's when you don't know the answer to that, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Well,
and
what's the answer?
Right. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, so since then I got really deep into, you mentioned like finding your why. I got real deep into that, the Simon Sinek, like start with why. I did a session with a gentleman, Gary Sanchez. I believe it's Gary Sanchez out of New Mexico. He does the Why Institute. They're fantastic. They help people, like anybody, find their, like what makes, what's your reason, like, for being. And it helped me discover that, and it really kind of lit a fire. And I realized that the things that I like to do are the things I should be doing. So I need to like really lean into that side of my life. So I like being part of like a bigger purpose. I like finding like the hidden meaning behind things. So like I like kind of like solving the big puzzles. So it was as soon as I figured that out, I was able to just kind of double down on it. That's when I started doing consulting, which I feel is very much a cop out for anyone who sold a business. It's like, oh, you sold your business. Oh, now you're going to tell other people how to do their businesses. But the ironic thing for me is that I really found like that was my purpose. Like I love helping other businesses. Like I would do it for free if my wife wouldn't kill me. So that's how you know it's a good thing. Like I have fun every day. I've been dabbling with creating a website, which we can talk about later, with for just business operations and things. I like tough problems, and I like being able to be part of something bigger. So it's been really fulfilling. And then I started leaning into more social activities. I got deep into like physical health, trying to make my health better. I want to become much more active. I'm trying to become like a 1%er in different aspects of another part of my life. So it's I realize that those are the things that are never going to change. Your family is always going to be there. Your health is something that's all you have at the end of the day. So you got to take care of your body and take care of your mind. So that's become a big part of my life right now.
I would definitely ask. So, what would you say is one? And we'll maybe we'll move from here. But what would you say is one of the biggest things that you think is important for a founder to have in place to be able to start preparing, exiting their company, and maybe even having something lined up for them to step into? Because before, when I was asking that question, of course, I don't believe anybody should dwell on the past. I think it's for that next generation, right? And like our audience specifically are entrepreneurs, founders, people that are either building a business or want to get into business. And so we always love to pass on that wisdom. And obviously you've gained a good bit of it. So curious on that two-part question. What should they be setting up to be getting into preparation for selling and exiting their company? And then what do you think is a great practice for them to also start moving into that next phase of life?
Yeah. So from the practical side of just running the business, the biggest thing every business owner should be doing is trying to make themselves obsolete. That they should always be trying to just get their systems documented, getting the right people in the right place. Their job should be is that they should not have to be there every day, all day. If the business relies on one person, that's not a business, that's a job. You might own your own job, but it's not a real business in that sense. As soon as you can get that happening and you can really step away and take like a 2-week vacation and not have to answer your phone for 2 weeks, and the business doesn't implode, then you have a real business built, and then things can actually progress, and it's easier to sell that. If vice versa, I've worked with a lot of like blue collar guys, a lot of like HVAC, plumbers, electricians, things like that. When they try to sell, they're not really selling a business; they're selling their contacts, and there's no real value in that in the way they think there would be. So it's kind of tough for them. So I try to explain to them they got to systematize it. They got to document everything. And so that's really important. And it's also really important to know as a business owner that you should always be prepared to exit at like any moment, at the drop of a hat. I mean, like, God forbid tomorrow you get some kind of horrible illness, you're not going to be able to work day to day, and you're going to have to kind of like step away from the business and almost like exit. So they need to be always thinking about that and finding ways and just being prepared for that, I guess, is really what it comes down to. So you should always kind of be a seller of the business a little bit and be ready to, at a moment's notice, to be able to step away. That's obviously easier said than done. I recognize that. I'm sure people listen to that and say like, I don't know where to start, and that sounds like a nightmare to me, and I get that. So I'm definitely. It's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So you just got to kind of start walking down that path and figure it out. And then for the mental side, just kind of figure out what are the things you actually care about in your life, like what it actually makes you. And a lot of people rely on the classic stuff. They fall back to family. They rely back on friends, religion, their community. I mean, those are like the core tenets of society, and there's a reason why they've lasted all these years. I mean, and that's the things that we should be focused on. At the end of the day, when people talk about like they're on their deathbeds of regrets, they don't talk about, I wish I went to one more meeting and I signed one more client. It's, I wish I spent more time with my kids, or I saw my father one last time before he passed away, things like that. That's what really matters to people. So it's, and we lose that perspective sometimes when we're younger and in the weeds and grinding it out and want to be successful. And it's tough because you don't get that perspective until you're much older. And I'm thankful that I'm starting to get that perspective and I'm not too old. So I'm trying to take advantage now.
My man, a God-fearing man, a family man, community-driven, like these are the staples, the core foundation. Man, I was feeling everything that you were saying. I want to talk how important software is, or systematizing, especially in, a blue collar and white collar industry if you're contemplating on selling, because you're right. It's the contacts, it's the book of business, it's how long have you been there and how reliable is that book of business for repeat business. But if you can systematize and actually build a type of SaaS, a type of software that automates emails, appointments, text messaging, calendar, organization, now we're talking about adding a multiplier onto your business comparatively to what, your gross or net profits are on a yearly basis. So I really just wanted to essentially overlay what Daniel's saying, how important it is. My virtual assistant company, it's great. Virtual assistants are attached to clients. I get recurring revenue. I have low churn rate, but it's my SaaS, it's my software, it's the organization, it's the structure. They go in and crystal clear today, they could see everything and how well it's done and just like that. And that's what people buy. They buy a well-oiled Mercedes-Benz, whatever car you want to put in for a reference. That's what they care about. They don't care about the repeat business. They care about the whole organization as a whole.
Yeah, 100%.
So, Daniel, let me ask this. You've exited this company. And listen, what you were saying before, I get like people say, oh, just because you exited a company, you shouldn't become. I think you should. You've done something that less than 1% of the population has ever done. You should, if you've exited a company, you should 100% become a consultant. I don't care what anybody says. I think that's a fact. Shane, once you exit your company, you're becoming a consultant too. It's happening. So anyway,
Shane should only do that if he actually wants to do that. That's the thing. Like if it's his purpose, he really should. It has to be in here. If you do it for other reasons, it never works out. So I'm a big firm believer.
I'm shocked Vinny even mentioned that because he knows me. Like he knows who I am.
I know.
Yeah,
I do, and that's why I think it'll be good for you. Anyway, with that being said, what do you love to do when it comes to consulting? Like, how do you show up as a consultant? Do you have a system, a process? Like, walk me through, and some of the listeners, like, because actually this is even helpful for a lot of our listeners in the sense of, what if they're hiring a consultant? What if they're hiring somebody that they think can help scale and build their business with them? So give us some of those inside scoops of what people should be looking for. How's your framework? Things like that.
Oh, definitely. So I'm very fortunate with my journey with consulting. So when I first sold, I was like, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to start my own consulting firm. I already started a business. Starting another business would be easy. And I realized that I didn't like working by myself. So just being a one-man band was not very fulfilling. It gets very lonely when you're like the only person, you're just talking to yourself all day. And even when you have clients, it's just not as exciting. So I actually reached out to an old friend of mine who I had hired as my coach for years. And he was a gentleman, Eric, out of Boston. He's one of the best. And I reached out to him and it felt a little odd to me because, he had worked for me essentially. And now I'm going to go back to him and say, hey, let me join your firm. But after I realized that, like, I've worked with his firm for years, I love all the people over there. So I was like, let me jump on board and let me see what we make happen. And it's been like the best ride ever with them. So it's like I get to go work with the smartest people I know, way smarter than I am, which is fantastic. That's usually a good sign. You don't ever want to be the smartest person when you talk to someone, when they're in the room. So I get to hang out with like these amazing people every day. And then they have, we have our own operating system we work with for small businesses. That's like what we're working off of. So anybody out there looking to hire like any sort of consultant, the big question that you should be asking yourself is like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So I wouldn't presume to go in somewhere and try to shoehorn myself into solving every problem under the sun. But if someone says to themselves, like, I have a problem with revenue, I have a problem with people, whatever it might be, like, know what you want to get, where you want to go before you start having the conversations and start seeking out those solutions. And then start asking around, talk to people, I'll talk to business owners, say, like, I need to solve a problem around revenue. Who do you know who's helped you in the past? Who could you introduce me to? And then talk to them about what the actual like solutions they propose could potentially be. Most people like myself, like at least the really good ones out there, they'll spend time talking to you for free. Not like, not obviously, dozens of hours, but like, I'm happy to have conversations with people. If they need help, try to help them. And if we can find a way to make money, that's great too. But at the end of the day, like the organization is all about help first. That's one of the values of the organization. So we truly believe that. So when people come to us and say like, hey, my business is imploding, I think I'm gonna go bankrupt tomorrow. Like, can you talk to me? Of course. I'll happily carve out time for that person. We hope that wouldn't be the case. I prefer not to have nothing but horrible hair on fire problems, but that's okay too. For me, getting into the businesses, it's fun. Like, I love getting to see all these different companies from the other side and how they're all the same and they're all different. And it's like really like interesting to go work for, HVAC person, and that's like such a different business than like a health studio, which is such a different business than a retail space. And they're all the same in this because they all have people problems. Everybody has problems with people. It's always the same. It's 90% of your problems are around your people. And I like to see how they're all, like I said, they're all a little different, all the same. It's fun.
He's almost glowing. Like I'd say he's not even in the consulting space. He's in the people space. Like, you could tell that he's having a good time. You could tell like his purpose is the people. It's providing that. I have that same aspiration for businesses and startups. Like, I love seeing like how it's built, like the core foundation, the integrity of that excites me. So I definitely, I like that aspect of you as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Startups are a real pain. I applaud you for getting in on that level. Yeah.
Startups are definitely rough, but once you pass that, everybody says that too. Like, it's the common thing, and it's so true. It's, business isn't about, it is about the success, but it's not about the, where you end up. It's really about the journey and then what you do when you're pinned to corners and you're worried about payroll and you're worried about firing this person or hiring this person or making these decisions. But that's business. Like, this is your journey that you're taking. If success looks like this, and that's what people are telling you, to fire that person right away. Success looks like freaking this, man. It's all over the place. Mm-hmm. That's the best part about it. That's how you grow. That's how you learn, is from failure.
Oh yeah.
And then
even as businesses grow, they hit like ceilings of complexity. So when you're a one-man operation starting out and you're just doing it on your own, and then all of a sudden you have to start hiring people, it's a different beast. And that's a different beast when you have to have a management team. And then it's a different beast when you have to have a management team managing managers. And it starts growing. And then there's all these different, like, the valleys of death for businesses. So like every time you hit that ceiling complexity, you need a kind of a different solution. And it's a different mindset to get through each one. That's why a lot of times in Silicon Valley, you have these guys who are great founders of companies. They can do a startup and they have really good ideas, but they hit that ceiling. They're not a good guy to be a CEO of a company that's a unicorn and it's going to go forever. That's why they get kind of pushed out after a while, because they're good at the other part of it.
This is also why coaches exist, though. This is also why people like you and like Vin and another amazing, great coaches that we talk to, the people who have been to this plateau before, they know how to overcome it. They know how to mentally prepare you. They know how to enter that battle scene, mentally, because that's the most important thing, on how to overcome these certain things and what to fear, so you can get to the next bottleneck or the next plateau into the business.
Yeah.
You go into a business, what's the first thing that you do?
So I like to see a couple things when I first walk into a business. I want to see the financials. I want to see where they're at, good or bad, ugly, whatever it might be. You'd be surprised the number of businesses, and you'd be surprised at the size of businesses that don't have good books. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised.
Well, why do you start there? Why do you start at the financials?
So sorry. It's like a couple multi-pronged approach. I want to see the financials.
Okay.
I want to see what your current state organizational like chart looks like. I want to see kind of like what are the roles in the organization? What are you working with? Who do you think reports to who? And then like who's responsible for what? They're going to be wrong, but that's okay. I want to kind of see what the current state of the organization is. And then I also like to get a feel for the overall like vibe of the company. I want to talk to some of the people and just kind of get an idea of what they're feeling. Again, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it might be. I just want to kind of see where they're at. And that'll help me paint a good picture of the overall organization. I like to know money because it's just the fuel for the engine, essentially. If you don't have gas, it's not going to go. And that's the first part. It also kind of tells me how much the business owner knows about their business. So if you walk in, you can ask them, hey, what's your net profit margin for the last quarter? If they can ramble off the top of their head, that's a good sign. If they can't, it's not a terrible sign, but it's not a good sign. So we kind of have to figure out what they're working with. And then with the people, it's also just kind of important to get that culture that's already exists. Every company has a culture of some sort. It could be defined. Hopefully, it's defined, and you're trying to cultivate it, and you're trying to make it like what the DNA of the organization. But if you're just letting it exist and it's out there, it still could be a culture that's negative, and it could be a lot of backstabbing and pointing fingers, and it's about putting your finger on that pulse and figuring out what does the organization look like, and then we can figure out where you're at right now today. All right, well, where do we want to get to? And then we sit down. I like to sit down with the owner and the leadership team, and then we like to go, all right, what's your 10-year plan? Where do you want to be at 10 years from today? And then we start working backwards. Like if you want to be at that place in 10 years, where do you got to be at in 3 years? Then you got to work, what do you got to be at in 1 year, 90 days, where you got to be at next week, where you got to be at tomorrow. And it all kind of just builds on itself and try to figure that out. And part of being the outside perspective is to help them figure those goals and make them obtainable, because it's hard. It's easy to think of that long-term 10 years, like where do I want to be? And it's kind of easy to say to yourself, where do I need to be at tomorrow? Like you just kind of figure out your tasks day to day. It's hard to bridge that gap between the two, because it's like a year feels really long, but in reality, it's really not. So people always overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 3 years. So it's kind of just getting that mindset to figure it out. I spent a lot of time working on just goal setting and making sure we're doing the right tasks to move forward. That's usually I spend a lot of my time with people.
How much time do you think that takes at the start? Do you do like a full day within the organization? Do you do a half day?
Yeah. So generally, the way my system works is that we do. I have two types of clients. So I have clients I'm just coaching on like one specific issue. So like I said earlier, if you have a problem with people or operations, whatever it might be, different people in our group can help with different problems. And so I'll have people I talk to a couple hours a month, a couple hours a week, depends on whatever their cadence they need is. And those are just kind of ongoing. We're going to solve your problem and move on, and just kind of coach that person up to figure out whatever their issue is. The other type of people we're working with, it's like usually a quarterly day where we do an all-day session. So it's like 8 hours. It's the owner, it's a leadership team. We're getting together in a room, and we're going to review the last 90 days. We're going to look at the next 90 days / next next year, and then we're going to kind of figure out what the game plan is. So it's about kind of just setting those benchmarks and then hitting them, and then figuring out what's standing in our way. Everything kind of falls back to it's either people, operations, marketing, or strategy. So something's one of those 4 buckets, and we just got to kind of drill down and figure out what the root cause is. So it's a lot of just kind of being like that outside sounding board. Even when I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do. And even when I was running my own business, I still like to use an outside voice, because it's easier when I was that person in the room I didn't need to facilitate the meeting and try to participate in the meeting. So it's nicer to have someone who can like just bounce those ideas off. And sometimes having that voice that's not in the room every week gives a different perspective to all the problems that are occurring in a business, because you get a little bit of that like echo chamber when it's the same 5 people and you're staring at each other, and it's like we meet every Tuesday at 9:00 and we're like banging our heads against the wall, and we need someone else who can maybe point out what is glaringly obvious to us. So So usually it's about those. It's like I said, it's usually every quarter, those kind of like in-depth meetings. it's a good cadence to be thinking about like on the business instead of in the business.
I want to get your input on two things here. Obviously, I want to get your input on AI and the hot topics, and what are you fearful, and what are you excited about, and then this kind of ties in a little bit. I know we were talking about this before the podcast, but networking and the powers of networking, and do you see face-to-face networking essentially still being crucial 5 to 10 years down the road with technology where it's at today? It's kind of like a combined answer, but combined questions. But
yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. Okay, so with AI, I'm leaning all in on AI. So I mentioned I'm building that like a website. I basically took every tool that I ever used as a business owner for managing people, and I popped it under like one hood essentially. And I'm leveraging AI to the max to build it, to operate it, to help the business owners. And then the goal eventually is that as we get more data, we're going to use it to train the algorithms to help predict which employees are like at risk to not be like fulfilling their potential every week or month based on their scorecard metrics, their trainings, we use a lot of like personality profiling. So we're just trying to find better predictive metrics for all those people. So by the time this is shown, our website, we're in beta right now, but we should be fully launched by then. So I'm hoping anybody can come check it out. I love giving away free trials to anybody because I'm like I said, I'm trying to help everyone who's out there. So like I said, I love AI. I think it's a game changer. I think it's one of the greatest things ever happened. I know we're all afraid of taking our jobs away, but I think it's only going to make things better at the end of the day. Like quality of life should go up significantly because of AI. Like the quality of my life compared to my grandparents is like infant. It's astronomical when you think about like how much better I have. I have literally the sum of human knowledge in my hand at all moments. I can go sit on my couch. I can watch basically unlimited entertainment. I can be anywhere in the world in under 15 hours. I mean, it's insane when you think about how great everything is. And I know a lot of people make a lot of money talking about how terrible the world is, and we're all gonna die, and it's the worst thing ever. But in reality, I don't believe that. I really think this is the best time to be alive. Like, if I actually change one thing in my life, I would want to be born like 40 years later than I was, because I feel like there's just so much happening there. It's amazing to be able to experience like today. So yeah, like why wouldn't we want to be in this moment? And I think a lot of like we talk about like the face-to-face, the human connection. I think that's where a lot more of things need to go. I have some other business ideas. Most of them involve more of like a service-based, like interactions with people. Like I think there's a need to be outside the digital and be like one-on-one with someone, or not just one-on-one, but like be in the real. And it's like when you go to a meeting and you said it, everyone's on their phones and they're huddled down. They're not looking up at each other. I think it's important to have like those like technology-free spaces where we can just be people with each other and communicate, and networking is an of that. By the way, I hate networking. I'm not a sociable person when it comes to like an event. I would rather sit by the wall and put up my phone, and I hate having to make conversation and meet new people. But I force myself to do it because it's definitely important, and it's one of those things you have to do to just be successful. It's about who you know in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's also increasing those social skills, especially in this technology era that we're currently in. I love your perspective on things. This kind of follows up here, and it might just tweak the mindset a little bit different, because I do think with AI, utilizing its tools and having that mindset and perspective on life is phenomenal, but also knowing the potential reality that can come in with robotics coming into place, taking over a lot of the blue collar, eventually white collar industry. The question is, which I think is going to be the biggest question known to man, it's not what is my why, it's what is my purpose, because people now associate their purpose, like with what you said, with their job, with their title, with their company.
Yeah.
That's who they are. And you're living proof that that's not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I mean, I kind of answered my own question, but
I mean, I have a real
there any
fear.
others
My biggest
that-
fear with AI has to do with with people not having a purpose, that we can, eventually when the robot overlords are able to provide all the free food we can eat and all the energy we need, we're going to have no purpose. And I really fear that people are going to then end up addicted to drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be. And I think that scares me more than anything. I think it's easy to feel that that if you have no reason to being, that you're not going to really contribute to anything.
Is there any advice you can give to that now that people that are watching this or can transition almost their mindset? I know it's not something like this, but maybe just to get in their back of their mind.
I still believe in is find a community, whatever that might be. And you just need to be able to interact with other people. Don't be alone. I mean, it's really tough for men. I mean, nowadays, more and more men have no close friend where they can talk to. That's a scary thing. So you need to have some sort of a group that you see on a regular basis. And I don't care what that is. Find that thing for you, that you have that community. Ideally, I would suggest being in person. I know a lot of more people are doing things like video games or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying that's a thing you shouldn't do. I'm not negative on it, but I think having that interaction face to face, having that person you can rely on, where it's someone you can call at 2 a.m. and say, "Hey, my car's broken down the side of the highway. I need you to come get me." And you have that person there for you. It's different. It's important. I wish I could see around the corner a lot more on the AI. It's tough with these kind of big moments for inflection with technology. I don't think anyone really has the perfect answer of what the world's going to look like in 20, 30 years. We might all think we know what it looks like, but that's the whole problem of trying to predict the future. It's really hard.
I also think that if you don't prepare for the worst, whatever we think, just like when you had that gut feeling about your business you should have sold 2 to 3 years prior, what you think about AI and the future of robotics, I think it's coming. Or at least prep for the worst. And then it's just like coaching. So if they're prepping for the worst in 10, 15, 20 years, how do we work backwards to prevent my situation from getting any worse compared to this ultimate ending or whatever the case may be? Why not start preparing now?
Yeah. Not only that, but in every opportunity, someone's always going to be making money off of it. That's the other thing. Right now, everybody's worried about, with tariffs and trade and everything like that. And I understand that fear. That is a real concern. But out there somewhere right now, there's somebody who's going to be making a killing off of this. Somebody crushed it in 2008 during the housing financial crisis. People crushed it during COVID. I mean, just because the world is kind of going to a terrible place doesn't mean that there's not opportunities out there. And it's about trying to figure out who are the winners going to be in any of those situations, and then how do you seize that. So it's kind of tough because everyone's so pessimistic about everything, that it's easy to kind of fall in that mindset. But it's kind of important to say to yourself, all right, let's think about that. Who are the winners going to be, and how can I be one of them?
But see, that's the 99% and the 1%.
Yeah.
Those 1% who have optimism, who have perspective, how can I utilize this to my advantage? And how can I use this to gain compared to bitching, complaining, being afraid, and hoping?
Yeah.
No, we're ready. We're coming into the battle. Sorry, I love this conversation.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. It's fantastic.
Hell yeah. So, Dan, we're coming up close to the end here. It has been a phenomenal convo. It's been a lot of fun talking about the future of the AI overlords, which somehow every podcast winds up getting there. But with that being said, we got a few final questions for you, my man. One of them being this. The premise of our show is not the fact that we are billionaires, yet it is the ideology that everyone can be a 1%er and that there is a 1% of everything in this world. And so we're always curious about learning what people's versions of being 1%ers looks like. And we're curious about yours. So with that being said, what is your version of a 1% life?
I'm a believer that by combining a few things, it makes you that kind of special sauce. So plenty of people speak Japanese and plenty of people can program, in Java and all these different things. But if you combine them, then you become that special 1% person by existing. So my special things that I kind of put together, I'm a hardcore avid chess player. So I play every week. I talk about like community. I have my community every Thursday night. I meet the same guys and gals and we play. And I am within the top 1% on chess.com. So I feel like that is a 1%er right there.
Hell yeah.
So that's
I'm a 1400.
What's that?
1400. I'm a 1400.
That's pretty good. I'm not knocking it. It's yeah.
You're 17, 18?
Yeah, I hit 18 recently. I've dipped a little bit though,
Yeah.
so I'm a little upset myself. So I believe in like in a couple different things. So like I said, chess is definitely one of my 1%ers. I'm a big time hiker. I love like that long distance endurance hiking. I lived in New Hampshire for 10 years. I got deep into the mountains up there. They have 48 peaks over 4,000 feet. I've done all but 2 of them at this point. Now I've started doing the highest peak of every state, which if you, it sounds a lot more daunting than it is, but you go to like Delaware and it's in like a subdivision. So it's not as tough as, I imagine. But then you go to Denali and it's a whole different beast. So I get really into that. So I like doing like pushing myself as physically as much as possible. And then I also feel like I'm 1%er when it comes to just business operations. I really feel like I do it's tough to like talk about yourself in that way because like I don't it's like that shameless how great I am, but and I don't really I have a little bit of that imposter syndrome even though where I'm at today, but it's I definitely feel like I'm in that 1% when it comes to the operations of companies.
Listen, man, you got to be confident. There's a difference between cockiness and confidence.
Humbleness is there though.
No, it is, and that's what I'm saying. The difference between cockiness and confidence is you've earned the right to talk about something that you've done well.
Yeah.
And cockiness is when you haven't, and you're like you've never built or sold a business, and you're like, I come in and scale your business and teach you how to exit. It's like, no, you can't. Yeah.
The problem is that it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's it's the idea that if when you know a little bit about something, you are way overconfident about it, and then when you know more about it, you are not confident at all, and then eventually when you become like a crazy expert, you kind of feel a little bit better about it. So it's like the most confident people are the people who know nothing about a topic.
Right. It's the more that you know, the dumber you think you are. And
yes,
it always reminds me of this one story that I liked from Greece. Right. And there was the Oracle of Delphi was talking. There were these people and they came to the Oracle with a problem and Socrates was there. And the Oracle said to Socrates after hearing the problem, she said, "You there, the wisest among all of these men. What do you think about this?" And he says, "The only thing I know for certain is that I know nothing at all."
Yeah. That's very true. I feel that way a lot.
It's a great statement.
So tell me this one. We got, and this might actually fall in as a good next question based on this convo. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice, that's a great question. I would say that I had a friend who used to tell me that no matter how much I like to catastrophize. So like whenever I think about like the worst case scenario, I spin myself up into the truly worst case scenario. And he liked to remind me that like no matter how bad I think it's going to be, it generally is never going to be as bad as I imagine. And I know we talked earlier about like planning for the worst, and that's not the same. I think you should always have a plan in place, or like what if the bottom falls out? What if the world kind of ends? And be ready for that. But every little decision and every little thing, if an employee is late, and I turn that into that employee thing about leaving the company, and it's my key person, and now we're gonna go bankrupt in 6 months. It's easy to do that, and that's one of probably my biggest weaknesses. And he gave me that advice of like, don't overthink a lot of things, and realize that like it's not. We are easy to make it worse in our minds than it really is ever going to happen.
Yeah. It's okay to think that way, though. If you've read 4 Hour Workweek, they kind of dive into this scenario here that if you literally think about what the worst thing that could ever happen to you in your business, play it out, write it down, dive into that. He's like, actually writing it down and journalizing it will actually work out your stressors to that. And then you start to realize solutions to that. Well, if my business does do this, I mean, I'll still be able to get a job. I'll still be able to pay my rent with this job. Still be able to provide food on the table. Okay, well, that's a solution to the worst case scenario if this happens. He's like, write it down. It plays itself out. You start coming up with solutions.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what it reminded me of.
Oh yeah, I like that a
Rest
lot.
in
Yeah.
peace, by the way, he actually died recently, unfortunately, and he was unfortunately a young man. He died hiking with his family. Anyways, rest in peace.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Well, condolences to him and his family. It's never a good thing, unfortunately. So, Shane, thanks for taking that bleak turn into
I apologize.
our episode here.
This is how my mind works. I mean,
Shane's like, look, the worst possible thing happened because he didn't write it out. No, that's messed up, Shane. Come on now. So,
I analyze what people are telling me, and then I exasperate it sometimes, and
so I'm going to go back. Shane's convinced me I'm no longer hiking. Thank you, Shane. I'll find a 1% or something else.
All right. I'm sorry.
So, all right. Last question for Dan here. Dan, how can people get connected with you? How can they get more in touch with you? Get involved in your ecosystem?
Okay. So the best ways to reach me. So the company I'm with for consulting is Crews and Co. CREWS and co.com. I'm on there. You can find me. You can LinkedIn me, Daniel Heck. Message me on LinkedIn. You can put my email in this bottom of this video. People can reach out to me. I'm very open. Like I always say, anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to talk anytime. Whenever I do these kind of things, like I always have a few people who do, and it's always great conversation. So if you're even halfway thinking about it, just feel free to drop me a line. Also, my website is Cultrvate, which again, we can just put that somewhere in a link or something. And I said it's a software for business owners for operations. So we work with trying to get the right people in the right seats. So it's I would toot my own horn on that one. It's pretty good. And it's a lot less than trying to do everything a la carte. So it's a good solution for everything.
Love it. Well, Dan, thanks so much for your time, your insight, your wisdom, and for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Stick around for a minute after the episode's over. I got a thing or two to tell you. And there you have it, folks. Check out what Dan's got going on. Get involved. Ask him about chess. Ask him about which hikes he'll never do now. And stay tuned for your next episode of the 1% podcast. Remember, like, share, follow, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode. And as always, I'm your host, Vin End.
And I'm Shane, the Ruiner.
And that was Dan. See you, everybody.
Bye, guys.